Hello everybody. I'm back with a new sample of what I will be producing for my Patreon subscription. So just have a look. You get a little preview of something that I will be dealing with extensively in the Patreon subscription. So here is a small piece and an example of what I will be doing with a specific topic in my Patreon subscription. Let's have a look. So I believe it was just before the summer holidays that I published a promotion video on this specific topic, the so-called problem of house division. And what I discovered there was the main reason why I wanted to continue this video series on Patreon. And I've explained this in my previous introduction to this material. So just keep posted up here, and I will let you know what the content will be of this very important talk about the so-called problem of house division, because there is no problem of house division in the ancient texts. So that's a very interesting departure of this specific topic. But let me show you just why the specific reasons are and what you can learn when you join this Patreon subscription. These are the reasons and what will be on offer when you subscribe to this specific Patreon subscription. There will be uploaded videos monthly, one or two, I guess. The problem of wholesale houses and equal places and quadrant divisions will be addressed, and these, as I've said before, were no problem in the original system of Greek astrology, as Robert Schmidt put it. And I will introduce it in step-by-step argumentation, just like Schmidt did. And it's an in-depth study of how equal places interact with wholesale places, because that's the whole issue. Yeah, and of course I will be giving example charts and question and answers. Questions can be placed and answers will be given as far as it's in my grasp to really address all the possible questions that people might have. But it's a very interesting study, and I really like this topic because it makes so much sense, and it's also very important to address the issue of the many house systems that were introduced in the history of our astrology. So that's an interesting approach to this issue, and I'll give you an example of why it's so important, because I hope you can see in this example how Schmidt evolved his understanding of all this astrology, and I will do so by showing you some by comparing an old translation that he did in a very early work of Project Hindsight, the translations of the work of Valens, and how he translated the same passage in 2016 when he produced his paper on the problem of the house division in Greek Hellenistic astrology. So let's have a look. So we're going to talk about the issue of topos, which is the Greek word for what we now call a place, which has also to do with topics. So here I'm going to compare Schmidt's early translation of this specific part of Valens Book 1, Chapter 1, and compare it with his new translation, and then you will see how far the consequences go with the right understanding of what's actually written there, and that I will further investigate in this subscription on my Patreon page coming in November. So in I believe it was 1993, yes, it says so on the slide, that this translation was first published, and this is the all-important citation, which is going to be very important in the treatment of this issue of what is the correct house division, etc. So let me read it for you. When the benefics are well and suitably situated, they produce their special effects in accordance with their own nature and the nature of the zodiac, which is the image where it's in, with the additional admixture of the testimony and or co-presence of each star. But when they fall amiss, they are indicative of the opposite effects. Similarly, if the malefics have dealings when they are suitably placed and in sect, even they are dispensers of good things, and they are indicative of higher positions and advancements. But if they are unprofitably placed, they produce dismissals and accusations. Well, all by itself this is reasonably clear, but we need to look at the new translations to see where the very interesting specific points are made and the differences between these translations of 1993 and the one that Schmidt gave us in his treatment of the topics of the house divisions in 2016. So this is the new translation. So when the benefics are lying in place, which is different from the remark suitably situated. So when the benefics are lying in place and well situated, they affect their own significations according to their own nature, as well as the nature of the sign, with the testimony through aspect or advocacy through co-presence of each star mixed in, but when they have fallen amiss, they are indicative of hindrances. And also, when in like manner the malefics are transacting business while in place, and of the sect, they are givers of good things and indicative of the greatest kinds of rank and advancement. But when they are unable to transact business to advantage, they affect banishment and accusations of different sorts. Well, this, as you can see, there is quite a difference in the terminology that Schmidt used for the new translation in 2016, and these will be all important in the treatment of this so-called problem of house division. So let me have a look at this citation a little more closely. So here we have the first part of this citation, this quote again. And let's have a look at it, because as you could see in the previous slide, there was also a mention of the malefics, but let's just have a look at this first part, because there are many terms in them that are quite unfamiliar, and we need to address them to try to understand what's going on here and what is addressed in this citation. So these are the things I want to have a closer look at, and which will be explained in the course of this complete translation and this complete treatment of what is meant by the cusp systems in the whole sign places. So let's first have a look at what is meant by lying in place, epitopos kaimenos. That's a very important one, because this is the crux of the complete treatment of this whole situation, and it of course has to do with cusp systems. So yeah, that's a very important one. So we need to address this issue forthwith, so to speak. The second remark is referring to planets being or lying well situated, and the question then is, in what images are planets well situated? And this we know, because these are called the good places, and as reported by Timaeus and Nechepso, the king. So yeah, we know what these are. That's great. I will address them also, of course. Own significations and own nature. So there are conditions where a planet cannot bring it to completion its own significations in accord with its own nature. So the question then becomes, what are these conditions? Because in astrology nowadays, it's often assumed that a planet will always function in its own significations and its own nature. So this clearly suggests that it's not always possible for a planet to do so. So that's an interesting take on what happens when a planet is not epitopos, so to speak, or not well situated. So that's an important issue to address. So we need to understand what these conditions are. So I will address them in this talk. the nature of the sign, and of course the question is, what are these natures according to traditional astrology, and perhaps specifically Greek Hellenistic astrology. The fifth point is testimony and advocacy, and it's interesting that there's a difference made. Testimony is something else, that's through aspect, martyria, or advocacy, which is symparousia, which is through co-presence. When a planet is together with another planet in the same image, then that's not testimony, but it's called advocacy, which is a difference. Interesting. And the last thing to address, which is a very important one, is about the idea of falling amiss. What is falling amiss? We know this also because it's referred to often as being in one of the bad places, the ones reported by Timaeus and Hepso. But there's more to it, because there's also a referral to what's called poorly and unfavorably situated. So there's something more going on, and the question, of course, is what is the difference? Again, we need something more specific to understand what is meant by this remark in this quotation. So there we have it. Yeah. So we need to have a closer look at this issue. What is the idea of epitopos? What is that, and what difference does it make for the delineation of planets, being them benefics or malefics? So this is what Schmidt said about it. This carefully written passage tells us under what circumstances a planet can effect its own significations, that is, bring them to completion. So we must understand that there are also conditions when it cannot do that. And that's of course important for delineation. This does not mean that a planet is inactive or inoperative. If it fails to meet these criteria, we must assume that a planet is always busy or at work in some manner, but there are many qualifications to the idea of a planet being at work. In what manner is it at work? And this is strongly dependent on the place where the planet is lying in, and of course if it's in a good place, and also epitopos kaimenos. So the question is under what circumstances it can bring its dealings to a successful conclusion, one that is favorable for the native in the case of benefics and unfavorable in case of the malefics. So that's the issue that we need to address, and of course I will do so in this subscription extensively. So I'll see you there, I hope. And as you perhaps know, I've made a great many videos on all sorts of issues in Hellenistic Greek astrology, and I got some kind comments on my earlier work, and you can read about them here. And of course all these things, all these issues that I addressed in these talks and these videos will in some way or other return in my presentations that I will be doing for my Patreon subscription. So I hope to see you there.